Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one. Chris, you're on the air.
Oh, hello, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Oh, good. So over the weekend, the fine people at World Energy GH2 did a little bit of a discussion with the Ammonia Energy Association over in Europe. And they were generous enough to almost suggest a couple prices that would be charged for their product. They did not, they confirmed they don't have a final investment decision time. They did say sometime in 2025, probably a year from now. There was a recent interview, so maybe summer for final investment decision. And I know at the top of the show you mentioned, what is green hydrogen, or what is green. And so the ICT hydrogen tax credits did pass last week. They were part of Bill C-69, passed on June 20th. So those are into effect now. Now I haven't read it all yet, so I can't speak to it in any depth, but we do have the rules out there now, and they are, at a glance, not quite as high a standard as Europe or the States is pursuing. Kind of one of the cores around that is what's called the three pillars, which is additionality, localization, and it's escaping me. But basically the analogy that they use is if you're going to show up to a party with beer, you should show up at the right time at the right party and bring your own beer. And if you're not doing that, then you're kind of taking from the system. And so there is work being done to make sure hydrogen isn't sapping good, clean energy from the grid, because if it does that, well, then just other fossil fuels will be burned elsewhere. But concerningly, they say that additional power is any power that was established after November the 3rd, 2022. So we don't really have additionality rules.
And excuse the ignorance, but why would that be important?
Not ignorance at all, Patty. It's incredibly in the weeds. So if you build a green hydrogen product and you don't have sufficient electricity yourself, then you need to buy it from the grid or some other operator. And if you are buying it from that operator, then you are suddenly impacting the net demand of that system. And most systems will replace demand with fossil fuels. And so even here, we have much hydrogen, even though the last few months since the Lil went down, we've been running about 15% on hydrocarbons. So that would mean that the new generation that's coming from the grid would be maybe not eligible, which is, maybe a problem for them. But if it was somewhere in Nova Scotia or Ontario or wherever, unless it's from a new power source, ideally that they built themselves, you're really just taking clean molecules from the system.
But isn't that the consideration that's currently being entertained by hydro in particular? World Energy can want whatever they want, but it would be up to the generating unit, and that would be hydro, in this case, Newfoundland Labrador Hydro. And part of that is an eighth generating unit out of Bay d'Espoir. Does that not cover off some of your concerns with the additional of more fossil fuels to, whether it be for Everac or Everwind or out in the Botwood, the Exploits Valley project, or World Energy?
No, not really. So,
why not?
If they are taking from our grid, and they've applied for, say, 120 megawatts. That's the only number that we have going around right now. They also say that they're maybe going to supply 80 megawatts to the grid, or the utility is suggesting maybe buying 80 megawatts. So there's still a 40 megawatt deficit that. If it's not coming from new power, it's coming from traditional power, which is going to drive up the carbon intensity, of the grid. It's a very in the weeds thing, but in the States, their big tax credit, had a very vigorous debate that the Europeans were a little annoyed about, that the power matching was done on an annual basis instead of or done on an hourly basis instead of an annual one. And so in Europe, they're having somewhat looser standards saying, well, if you're using power from any time over the last year, that'll be okay. In the States, they're saying, no. You need to make sure that you're using clean power from the last hour in order to ensure that everything is clean. And very, very, very in the weeds. So we're within the grand scale of things. I'm fairly confident we'll probably still be able to export to the United States and Europe, but maybe not quite as at low of a price as is thought.
Well, and all of that is unknown at this moment in time for a variety of reasons. There's not going to be anybody on the other end sign a 10-year power purchase agreement with all of those details being consistently unknown, so that's got to happen. And final investment decision is not necessarily fully and 100% in the hands of World Energy GH2 and whoever their investors are going to be. It really does firmly rely on the federal government to dot the I's and cross the T's here. I mean, and you mentioned the United States. Some of these tax credits for these types of projects are directly related to the Americans bringing forward their Inflation Reduction Act, which is a huge amount of money attached to it. So without those two things being satisfied, no one can answer any of those questions you just posed, I don't think.
Well, so they could, they've passed their environmental assessment. They could start building now if they wanted. They are not, because they want the subsidies, And so in this little chat that they had last week, they did begin to suggest how much their hydrogen would cost to land. And so,
which was?
So they said half the cost of hydrogen made in Europe on the grid, which is, sort of an obtuse and kind of like, what does that even mean? So the levelized cost of hydrogen that we have coming out in Europe this year, and this is from, people who actually make it, is €13.69. And about $5.20 of that comes from the cost of electricity. So, they're what is his title? Chief Commerce Officer Greg Heath said that, basically they're using free electricity from the wind, which is an overgeneralization. But even without the cost of electricity in the cost of hydrogen landed in Europe, that puts it at $8.50.
Okay, to buy what unit of measure here? A cubic meter, 100 cubic feet? What is it?
Sorry, that's per kilogram.
Per kilogram.
Yeah. Sorry about that. And now they didn't give the number, but if we are to say half of what it costs to land in Europe, that puts us around $6.85 a kilogram. And that's pretty unrealistic. What was it? The H2 Global Auction, which is kind of what it sounds, hydrogen from around the world being auctioned to be bought in Europe, came in with a price range of 7 to 10 kilograms per, euro per kilogram. So, maybe we end up making, maybe we have the lowest cost hydrogen in the world. That seems to be what they're suggesting. That it seems a little unbelievable to me.
Well, I don't know, but if I have my numbers right, and I might not, in the United States, and of course in American dollars, hydrogen per kilogram is about $16, and they talk about via electrolysis, like is the process being proposed here, it's closer to $5 to $6. Is that not the accurate numbers? And that, of course, has nothing to do with capital costs for construction. That simply has to do with the process.
Yeah. So the $5 to $6 number that's been going around a while in North America has, by my kind of understanding, have been based off of best guesses, because everyone's still trying to scale up. We don't really have green hydrogen at that level. To make conventional hydrogen just out of like natural gas, it's only $2 a kilogram. So super, super cheap. And so then it's kind of like, all right, how much more expensive than $2 a kilogram does it get? And excuse me for not euros and dollars, whatever. It's, hopefully the exchange rate is close enough for it to be even out relatively so. But
fair enough. I'll give you final thoughts, Chris. I'm late for the news, but you go ahead and wrap it up.
Right. So in the ammonia talk, they said that they would need to make custom-built wind turbines because the wind is so high here. And so suggesting that we're going to have unique turbines that aren't built anywhere else in the world, which will obviously be much more expensive. So I can't imagine how, with not built product, with the most potentially expensive turbines in the world that are all custom designed, I have no idea how they're going to hit those numbers. Now, I would love to hear from them, and please correct me if it's not $6 or $7 a kilogram to land it in Europe. Perhaps I misunderstood the statements by Mr. Heath, but I stand to be corrected, and I would love to hear an explanation of how that all works.
I appreciate the time, Chris. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Patty. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.